So yeah, today's first story kind of is a match of my fortes, I guess, or my areas of expertise, because it's gaming, and then it's government and politics. And being a former mayor, it's crazy when those things intersect. So the news is this talk is about Ukraine, the country of Ukraine, which obviously many of you know has been invaded by Russia. Sent a letter to Xbox and PlayStation, Microsoft and Sony, however you want to look at it, asking for their help, basically against Russia. So everybody is trying to figure out, basically the world at large is trying to figure out how to respond to Russia and Russia's aggression in the invasion of a democratic country and such. And there's some interesting things happening, and this appeal to Microsoft and Sony, Xbox and PlayStation, is certainly interesting. So Apple, for example, decided to immediately cease all sales of Apple products in Russia. This happened a few days ago, and we'll get into why that is in a second. So in line with that same thought process, basically, one of the, what was it, the deputy minister, I think, deputy or vice minister of Ukraine, wrote this letter and said, basically, Microsoft, Sony, take Xbox and PlayStation services and make them unavailable to the Russian population. So here's the thought behind this. If enough companies or countries or whoever, depends on who we're talking about, start to inconvenience the Russian people and respond to the actions of the Russian government because of their actions, basically the Russian people will get angry, will get upset, and they will hopefully spur change and cry out against the government of Russia, who is invading Ukraine. The government of Russia, I'm not going to get into it all here, but is guilty of countless sins: repression, censorship, lack of free speech, lack of free press, tons of stuff. But basically that's the thought, and that's what companies like Apple are doing, is like, we are going to try to they're certainly not a country, but they do have a lot of influence on the population interested in Apple products. So interestingly enough, Ukraine has asked Xbox and PlayStation basically for help in their war, or in their defense against Russia, which is very interesting. The world has changed quite a bit, right? Just it's weird to think about that. But with that said, it puts Microsoft and Sony in a very interesting position, and I'm curious to see how they will respond to this, if they do respond, and I feel like they should. This is one of the if not the biggest issue in the world right now, and when an official of that level calls your name, calls for help, you should certainly respond in some way, shape, or form. So what is interesting, I think of a couple things about this. So first of all, what would it mean to shut off, kind of turn the valve close on Xbox and PlayStation in Russia? So the first thing I think they could do is they could simply stop selling new consoles, right, and new hardware. And I think that's probably the easiest thing to do. Just simply don't sell anything. Stop selling games. Stop selling anything. And I don't think that's a huge risk for either Microsoft or Sony, because frankly, Russia is 144 million people. But the Russian gaming market is certainly not the end-all be-all. It's not North America. It's not China. It's not Europe as a whole. It's a lot of games. I shouldn't say a lot of games, but there's certainly examples of games being censored or banned in Russia. Russia, for example, has a gay propaganda law, so that media, including video games, cannot be published in Russia if homosexuality is portrayed in a positive light, because that's against the law over there. So Um, keep that in mind the next time you're sitting there thinking about somebody's questioning what Russia has, what's wrong with Russia or whatever. So they're not exactly friendly to the gaming industry or any artistic industry in general. So anyway, they could just stop selling consoles. They could just stop selling games. They could probably do that immediately at very little risk other than their own sales, right? Yes, a lot is wrong with Russia. The second thing that they think, and I think Ukraine asked for this, the second thing that they could do is they could shut off their access to Xbox and PlayStation services altogether. They could basically shut off Xbox Live, shut off PlayStation Network, make it so you can't play, Fortnite online with your friends or whatever game you're playing. Can't purchase new games digitally. You can't use Xbox Live or PlayStation services at all. That might run with a little bit of a risk, and I'm not sure about this, because you think of consumer safety laws. The Russian consumers, which it's important to differentiate here, the difference between the Russian government and the Russian people, because the Russian people at large, are not driving this war. It is the Russian government and the Russian military. And a lot of the Russian people obviously do not like their own government. But Russian consumers have arguably paid for a lot of those things. So if their access to them is suddenly revoked, something that they've paid for, does that create a legal conundrum for Xbox or PlayStation, Sony, or Microsoft? For example, if I paid for 12 months, and later down the road, I guess they could fix this, I guess, just so to speak. If I paid for 12 months of Xbox Live or whatever, PlayStation Network, and then I suddenly don't have access for 2 months, that does create a conundrum for Microsoft or Sony, who has to figure out, okay, how do we refund all these people? Because they don't want to rip them off as a consumer. And I guess they could always say at the end, we're going to tack on 2 free months for everybody that this affected, or whatever. They could come up with some solution, but it does create a conundrum of how to go about doing it. If you have pre-ordered a game that is launching soon and you live in Russia, and then you all of a sudden you can't get it because, let's say, Sony has blocked PlayStation Network in Russia. Does that mean that you now are being disadvantaged as a consumer, as a normal person, as a buyer? It does create some interesting questions, and I for one, I'm very interested to see what Xbox and PlayStation do in response to this, because one of my whole things since I ever got involved in politics and gaming and streaming is I feel that gamers and the gaming industry has so much more power than it thinks. A lot of gamers, I think, we are very passionate about games, about game development, about fictional characters, but that passion can apply to the real world too, right? And if gamers band together, if gaming companies band together, they've got a heck of a lot of influence. And so that's why I would most definitely advocate that Xbox and PlayStation and whoever else, gamers, gaming companies in general, and some have, to their credit, band together and start taking stances against Russia in this effort to get the Russian people to speak out against and take action against their brutal, repressive, aggressive government, and actually make a permanent, hopefully, change for the better. So Phil Spencer, eyes are all on you guys, you and your Sony counterparts. So you have the floor, and I hope to hear news soon.